Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll give it just 1 or 2 extra minutes before we get started, just so everyone can join on. Great. So we'll get us started. Thanks, everyone, for attending this a virtual open house to learn about the city's proposed framework for processing and evaluating urban boundary expansion applications. We'll get to introductions on who from the city and Dillon Consulting are here in a moment. But if you can turn to the next slide, we'll begin with a land acknowledgement. The city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Ad- Ad- Anishinaabeg to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase, 1792, between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. And with that, I will turn it over to Dylan.
Hey everyone. So my name is Morgan Boyko. I'm with Dillon Consulting. I'd just like to welcome you to the webinar and virtual public open house today. So just so you know, the purpose of today's meeting is to provide you all with some information about the recent provincial policy changes that impact urban growth management in Hamilton. What we're going to be doing today is reiterating the city's commitment to firm urban boundary and responsible growth, but also really dive into talking about how the city is responding to these provincial policy changes. And through this webinar, we'd also like to gather your input on the city's proposed response and take the time to answer any questions that you might have. So we've got an hour and a half set out for this evening. We'll be wrapping up by about 8:30 p.m. I'll mention that you can dive deeper into any of the information that you hear about tonight on the city's Engage page. The web address is there at engage.hamilton.ca/UBE application framework, or you can scan that QR code and that'll take you to the Engage page, which has all of the information that you'll see here tonight and more, and lots of opportunities to ask questions and participate. This is the fourth public event that we've had to gather feedback and share information with the city. We've had 3 in-person public open houses so far, one downtown, one in Ancaster, and one at Gatestone Elementary School in the southeast of the city. We've had a great opportunity to speak to around 200 folks already that have come out to those events, and we're really appreciative of everyone that's come here today for the virtual open house. So Laura, if you could just go to the next slide there, we'll just, as Charlie mentioned, let you know who's on the line here to answer your questions and share this information with you. So you heard from Charlie off the top there. Charlie's with the City of Hamilton. He's the program lead in policy planning and municipal comprehensive review, and has been sort of the main go-to for the draft framework development that you're going to learn about. We also have on the line Dave Hayworth from the city, who's the manager of sustainable communities. So myself, Morgan, I'm with Dillon Consulting. So Dylan Consulting's role on this project has been to assist the city with the public engagement and communications about the draft framework. So we're helping to run the logistics for this webinar and helping to ensure that your questions are answered and that we take note of all of your comments. And then we also have Laura with Dylan, who is keeping things running smoothly for us and will help all of you with sort of questions and answers and the interactive components that we have throughout. And at this point, I will turn it over to Laura. She'll give us a few housekeeping notes for how this meeting is going to run.
Thank you, Morgan. Yeah, so I just wanted to go over some housekeeping items before we get into the presentation. So first of all, this meeting is being recorded. And after the session, both the presentation deck and the recording is going to be made available on the Engage Hamilton website. There are automatic transcripts that you can toggle on during this meeting if you'd like. If you experience any technical difficulties during our meeting, then you can let us know using the chat function. Our team is going to do our best to help you out with that. There are several ways for you to share your feedback today. You can participate in the polls that will pop up on your screen during the meeting. And at the end of the presentation, we'll provide similar questions on a survey for additional input. The chat is open and it's directed to the presenters only. We're going to be monitoring the chat throughout the evening, and we'll be making note of any comments that come through. If you have any questions, we encourage you to use the Q&A tool, and I'll discuss that further on the next slide. So the Q&A tool is the function to submit questions to our team. We'll have designated breaks throughout the presentation to answer your questions. Just to let you know, your screen name is going to be submitted or displayed with your question, but you can choose to submit your questions anonymously if you prefer. Questions submitted through the Q&A function will be visible for everyone to see. You can upvote questions from others that you'd like to prioritize. So we're going to be answering the top questions first as they come in. If we're unable to answer your question during the session, don't worry. We'll address your question on the Engage Hamilton's website using the Q&A tab after the event. For any questions you'd like to ask later, you're welcome to email us at urbanboundary@hamilton.ca. And just a reminder, there will be a survey at the end of today's session. So now that we've covered these logistics, I want to get the presentation started with a quick question about yourselves. So I'm going to pop up a poll, and we wanted to ask what part of Hamilton that you live in. So I'm just going to get this started. Give me one moment. Okay, so you can answer the question that popped up. Just give this a moment. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of people from Lower City, Mountain area, Ancaster, Lambrook, outside of Hamilton. Great. Looks like most of you have answered. So I'll go ahead and poll and just share what I saw on my end. Great. I'm going to hand it off to Morgan to go through the presentation's agenda.
Great. Thanks, Laura. And thanks, everybody, for letting us know where you're tuning in from. That's helpful for us. So just a quick outline of what we're going to be covering. So we've gone through welcome and introductions. It's great to meet all of you, and thanks for tuning in. Charlie's going to take over for most of the rest of this meeting with a presentation about the draft framework. So we're going to talk first about the recent provincial policy changes that led to all of this. and the rationale for establishing this draft framework for urban boundary expansion. Charlie will go through all of the details of that draft framework and all the components of it. And throughout, we're going to be asking you questions if you have any questions for clarification, but also get your feedback on components of the draft framework. We'll then start to wrap it up to talk about how you can participate more and the next steps. And then we'll keep a bunch of time at the end as well to try to get to any questions that we weren't able to answer throughout. We did have a question come in, Laura, about how many folks are online now. What are we at now?
You're at 64.
Okay, so we've got 64 people have tuned in. So if you are out there, you're not alone. You have 64 fellow community members also on the line. So thanks for that question. And yeah, we're looking forward to getting into some conversation here. So yeah, just as Laura said, to reiterate, please feel free to enter comments into the chat. Those will all be recorded and made part of this process. So put your feedback there. When we open up for the Q&A at various points throughout, please enter your questions and definitely upvote questions that you want to see answered most. And we'll try to get to those first. And then, as Laura said, anything that we're not able to answer in the time we have available today, we'll endeavor to answer over on that Engage Hamilton webpage. Okay, I think that's it. So for now, I'll pass it over to Charlie, and then we'll check back in a few slides with a quick Q&A break.
Great. Great. Thanks. And I'll try to be brief, but just for starting off with a bit of background, back in April of 2023, the province released the first draft of the new provincial planning statement, which would replace both the current provincial or the previous provincial policy statement and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. So the province released a draft of it and asked for comments back in 2023. And the city had provided very detailed comments and raised various concerns with the draft provincial planning statement. And the main one related to urban boundaries was the provincial planning statement removed the requirement for a municipal comprehensive review prior to urban boundary expansion applications being considered when they're over 40 hectares in size. And basically what this means is previously for larger urban boundary expansion applications, there was a city-led process, a municipal comprehensive review, where the city would assess sort of if, where, when urban boundary expansions were required. And under the new provincial planning statement, it allows individual private landowners to submit their own urban boundary expansion applications to the city of any size at any time and any location, provided those lands aren't within the Greenbelt Plan area. Also, last year, the province adopted Bill 185, which had several changes to the Planning Act, but one that directly impacted urban boundaries was that they amended the Planning Act to allow landowners who submit an urban boundary expansion application to a city to appeal city council's decision to say no to that urban boundary expansion application, or appeal if the city council didn't make any decision on that application within 120 days. So now that landowners can submit these applications and appeal council saying no to them, it means that the Ontario Land Tribunal could overturn, a council direction to maintain a firm urban boundary. Which those two changes combined have the potential to undermine and reverse the city's firm urban boundary growth strategy, which has been approved and reaffirmed by council. So the new provincial planning statement has come into effect. It came into effect on October 20th, and the Planning Act requires that all municipal land use decisions be consistent with the provincial planning statement. So if you move on to the next slide, so I can explain what that means for the city of Hamilton. So on this map shows the lands within the city of Hamilton that are outside of the existing urban boundary and outside of the Greenbelt Plan area, which is the large area hashed in green. And the city has over 4,000 hectares of land where the city could now receive urban boundary expansion applications. And on this map, we've broken down those lands into two areas. The purple area are lands surrounding the airport, where because of noise from the airport, there are restrictions on new residential land uses being developed there should an urban boundary expansion be approved. So we've identified those as potential employment urban boundary expansion areas where we could receive applications. And then the cream-colored areas are outside of sort of that area of influence from the airport. And those are where we could receive urban boundary expansion applications for residential land uses. And for the residential areas, there's four main areas that often get talked about. There's the 20 Road West lands, which are 3 areas that are surrounded by the urban boundary now, but are rural in the official plan. There's the 20 Road East lands, which are sort of directly south of the Hamilton mountain. There's the Elfrida area, which is a large L-shaped parcel that kind of wraps around Upper Stony Creek. And then there's the Whitechurch lands, which are sort of the southernmost area of where the Greenbelt Plan does not cover. And also a question that has come up in the earlier open houses is whether the province has made any changes to the Greenbelt Plan, which is shown here. And the province is required to review the Greenbelt Plan every 10 years. And the last review of the Greenbelt Plan occurred in 2015. So it is anticipated that the province will initiate a new review of the Greenbelt Plan. However, they haven't released any information at this time as to what would be within the scope of that review, what would be the timing of it. So I know it's a question that has come up a lot, but there's no new information on sort of the Greenbelt Plan and what the province may look to do with that in the future. If you move on to the next slide. So how do these changes impact Hamilton? The city, as I mentioned, the city has adopted, and we're now actively implementing a firm urban boundary growth strategy, where 80% of Hamilton's forecasted growth is being directed towards existing built-up areas through residential intensification, and the other 20% is directed to greenfield areas that are already within the urban boundary. So the city is actively doing this, and one of the main ways that we're trying to achieve this growth is we're updating our official plan and zoning bylaw policies and regulations to make it easier for residential intensification to occur. And one of the big changes that we have made is allowing for residential dwelling units on a one lot in low density residential areas to encourage that gentle density that we need to achieve the growth that is occurring. The city is also updating its various master plans to ensure that we are planning for the correct amount and low location of new infrastructure to support this in intensification. So we are currently updating our water wastewater master plans based on a firm urban boundary expansion growth strategy. And what these provincial changes do by allowing individual urban boundary expansion applications to be made is by potentially undermining the city's urban boundary growth strategy, it creates uncertainty around where new residential and employment growth will be directed. And if should a urban boundary expansion application be ultimately approved by council or the Ontario Land Tribunal, that expansion may have impacts on the existing plans that we have now to to encourage intensification, and it also could impact the city's pri priorities of preserving greenness space and a farmland around the existing urban boundary. Next slide, please. Oh, Q&A break.
Okay, so thanks for setting the stage there, Charlie. We do want to have a couple pauses throughout here because there's a lot of information here and a lot of kind of a complicated policy story that's recently evolved. So we do want to just pause for questions at a couple points. So Charlie kind of laid out there the recent provincial policy changes that kind of had led us to where we're at here today and how those new provincial rules are affecting the city. So I'd like to encourage you to, if you have questions about what you've heard so far, to click down on the little Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and you can ask your questions there. As I said earlier, there's also, there is the chat function if you've got a comment that you want to put in. We've had a couple of comments in there already. Quick comment that came into the chat box that I can address quickly. Someone asked if this information that we're presenting here today will be easily accessible for those that can't attend. And I can say that yes, all of the information that you're hearing here today is available on the Engage Hamilton webpage, and we'll share again the link to that a couple times throughout. But everything is there. So please check that out and then share it with folks you know that weren't able to make it to this meeting or any of the in-person open houses. So Charlie, I'll take a look over at our Q&A, and I see that there's some people that have been utilizing the upvote as well. So thanks, that's very helpful. So maybe we'll just for now deal with one or two of the questions that have come in so far. So our most sort of upvoted question so far, Charlie, is just a recognition, that this is sort of provincial policy changes that seem to be undermining the direction that the city of Hamilton wants to go. So the specific question is, how do we get the provincial government to back down from this provincial policy, which undermines our local democracy? Is there anything you want to say to that one, Charlie?
Yeah, thanks for the question, and we will get to it later on. But the city was opposed to these changes and very opposed to the specific change that kind of opens the door for these privately initiated urban boundaries expansion applications to be made and appealed. We are directing people who are opposed to the changes as well to contact the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing directly when we have contact information on our website on like who the minister is and how to get into touch with them, as well as with your local MPP. As land use planning in Ontario does kind of put it a bit bluntly, the province sets the rules in which cities are required to plan, and the cities are required to implement those rules. So so any sort of change in those rules would have to come from the province.
Okay, great. Thanks, Charlie. I'll maybe just do one more here while we've got you. The next most upvoted question was around sort of studies for the potential development areas, which I know we'll get into, but maybe you can give us a quick preview. So the question was, have feasibility studies or visioning exercises been done to establish best practices for these development areas or these potential development areas?
So the city hasn't undertaken a visioning exercise for these areas because the city currently has a firm urban boundary, but I'll get to it in the upcoming slides. We are, through the draft framework and the submission requirements, asking the applicants to show how their proposed urban boundary expansion will achieve a wide range of like the city's goals around a number of specific items, which I'll get into in the upcoming slides, and maybe can answer specific questions after that.
That's great. Okay, thanks, Charlie. And let's do one more quickly here because it's related. Just a question about how many urban boundary expansion proposals do you anticipate receiving each year, or are they already coming in? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. Yeah, I can quickly do that. Laura, if you could go back to the map, that might be the easiest, just so I'm not trying to talk about areas in an abstract way. So the city, for the 20 Road Westlands areas 2 and 3, so two of those, call them holes in the donut. The city received urban boundary expansion applications back in 2020 for those lands. And at that time, you could submit applications for under 40 hectares. So we received 3 separate 40-hectare applications to kind of fill in those areas. And as soon as Bill 185 was passed, that allowed those applicants to appeal council's, in that case, non-decision on those applications to the Ontario Land Tribunal. They did. So those applications are now on the Ontario Land Tribunal. We are going to receive an application for the Elfrida land area, which is a very large area. The application has been made very recently, and we are currently looking at it to see if they've given us the information required under the framework. And we don't have an update on that yet, but we will have one very shortly. And then we haven't received any other applications yet, but what I can say is the city, we have launched a page on hamilton.ca where we're going to be hosting all of the application materials that have come in for urban boundary expansion applications. So maybe I can put that into the chat in maybe when I have a moment. But for, let's say, the 20 Road West applications, we have just hosted all of the submission materials that came with those in order for the public to understand where applications have been received and what the status of those are.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Charlie. Okay, we have a bunch of other questions that have come in, but let's maybe just dive into the framework a little bit more, because I think that will start to help to answer some of them. And we will pause again shortly to get to a few more questions.
Okay, so just talking about the rationale on why the city of Hamilton sees the need to develop a draft framework. So the city's official plan currently doesn't contemplate this type of application, because when the council in the province last updated the city's official plan, these types of applications weren't possible. Now that they are, it's created a bit of a vacuum where, without a draft framework for processing these types of applications, applicants could essentially determine what they think are suitable submission requirements for an urban boundary expansion application, based on the higher level direction in the provincial planning statement. So we can't not process these applications. So we needed to create a framework to ensure that applicants who do submit these applications are looking not just at what the province says are sort of the minimum criteria for an urban boundary expansion application, but also make sure that those applications look at and assess broader intensification, land use compatibility, environmental, climate change, financial implications to the city. Essentially, have a framework so the city can add more rigor and scrutiny to an urban boundary expansion application. The framework also allows us to sort of clearly set out what the cities wants in terms of notification and consultation for urban boundary expansion applications. And I'll get to it in later slides, but we've identified in the draft framework enhanced and additional steps that we would expect an applicant to go through who is submitting an urban boundary expansion application. Next slide. So speaking to the draft framework itself, so over the summer, when the staff knew that the new provincial planning statement and Bill 185 were going to be coming into effect, we developed the draft framework and we presented it to Planning Committee and Council back in August. And at that time, Council provided direction to staff to use the draft framework should any urban boundary expansion application be submitted prior to this engagement that we're going through now, finalizing and the city incorporating the framework requirements into official plan policy. Basically, we didn't want to be caught flat-footed if these changes came into effect and we didn't have anything approved by council. Council also, in anticipation of these changes in urban boundary expansion applications, gave staff direction to create a new dedicated team to lead the review of urban boundary expansion applications. We established new, much higher application fees for an urban boundary expansion application. Council directed additional funding to be set aside for the city's Ontario Land Tribunal capital account in anticipation of appeals. So understanding that applicants can now appeal this, and an Ontario Land Tribunal appeal can be a lengthy and costly process, sort of setting, in this case, it was $1.5 million aside towards future appeals. And also some additional direction that looking at what the long-term financial impacts of urban boundary expansions are to the city of Hamilton. If you move on to the next slide. So at a high level, the draft framework is divided up into 3 parts. And part A sets out what specific technical plans and studies are required as a part of an urban boundary expansion application. Next slide. So the draft framework identifies a total of 26 different submission requirements that the city would ask for from applicants who are submitting an urban boundary expansion application. And some of these, which are listed here, are sort of more of our standard requirements that we require for any sort of development application. But if you move on to the next slide. We've also identified the need to enhance the scope and terms of reference of many of our technical plans and studies that we ask for, because urban boundary expansion applications are unique from the typical development application that we would see, like a new apartment building or townhouse development. And because these applications aren't currently contemplated in the official plan, we don't really have policies in place to guide what the city is looking for in these technical and these enhanced technical studies that the draft framework identifies. So maybe just to give a couple examples, the draft framework, and there's additional technical guidance from Dylan, we've identified enhanced requirement for an energy and climate change assessment report, which basically asks the applicant to show the city how the expansion of the urban boundary would impact the city's energy and climate change targets. So how does it achieve net zero by 2050? And then another one is a financial impact assessment, which basically asks, will the tax revenue and the development charges for this urban expansion area cover the full life cycle costs of the city once the city assumes the infrastructure that they have to build, as well as will the tax revenue cover the full cost of providing services to that area? So rec centers, libraries, police, fire. Essentially, in 50 to 100 years, if an urban boundary expansion is made and a residential neighborhood is built out, will that neighborhood pay for itself, or will it add to the city's infrastructure deficit? And there's a lot more studies here there's more detail in the framework that we have posted, but maybe if there's any specific questions, I can go back and speak more to those. Next slide, please. And then there were 3 new submission requirements that haven't been identified anywhere in the official plan, which we would bring into the official plan once the draft framework is approved. And the 2 are related to how does the expansion impact the city's housing and employment, depending on the type of expansion is being proposed, and also what is the impact to emergency services within the area, like police, fire, and EMS. Next slide, please.
Okay, so we're going to just pause here again to give an opportunity to answer some questions, but we also have a specific question for all of you. So you've heard Charlie just detail the submission requirements as outlined in the draft framework for any developer that would like to expand the urban boundary. Now, is there anything that came up in your mind as you were listening to Charlie that maybe there should be additional studies that should be required or more information that should be required from a proponent in an urban boundary expansion application? So we'll pause there for a sec to see if anyone has thoughts there. I'm just looking through the questions. We do have some upvoted questions that I'm going to get to, but Charlie, I want to try to get to the questions that are related specifically to these submission requirements. So one participant's asked, have any of these submission requirements incorporated the new work on the biodiversity action plan for the city?
Yes, great question. So one of the requirements is a first phase of a sub-watershed study that looks at the natural features on the site and the downstream impacts of any urban development of those rural lands. That's a great comment about tying it to the recently approved biodiversity action plan. The sub-watershed study takes a holistic approach to sort of what the overall impact of an urban expansion would have to, water, trees, like flooding, all of those things. But I think that's a great comment that there could be, specific reference in that terms of reference related to biodiversity. So we'll take that back too as a comment.
Great, thanks, Charlie. Another kind of related question. How does the city define prime agricultural land? Is there a standard?
Yes, good question. So the city's Rural Hamilton official plan, when it was first created, which was a while ago now, but through the creation of the Rural Hamilton official plan, the city had to map all of its existing rural lands and to determine which lands fell under the provincial criteria of that time related to prime agricultural lands, which are class 1, 2, and 3 soil types. So the most productive land types. So Schedule D of the Rural Hamilton official plan has taken that assessment that was done when the Rural Hamilton official plan was developed, and the maps out all of rural Hamilton and identifies what lands are prime agricultural areas and what are rural lands. And within the White Belt, there are both prime agricultural areas and rural lands. So there was a methodology used for that. It was before my time, but it was focusing on both the soil mapping within those areas, as well as an assessment of sort of how the area functions and is suitable for agricultural production.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Yeah, a couple more questions specific to these submission requirements here. One is, what about studies for schools and the impacts on school boards?
Yes. Yeah, great question. And so the city so one of the submission requirements is I believe it's called School Issues Accommodation Assessment. And basically it is looking at what uses the applicant who's seeking the urban expansion, like what types of housing they want to put in there. So the school boards can model the number of new kids that may be living within that area. Through the creation of, or through this engagement now, we have been talking to the school boards, and they've provided us sort of detailed input on what information applicants would need to give them in order for them to determine whether this expansion area would trigger the need for a new school within the expansion area, or what the impacts would be to adjacent schools within the nearby areas. And the school boards are in the same sort of difficult situation as the city with these changes, where the school board, as the city, thought that the official plan was that a firm urban boundary expansion, or a firm urban boundary, was the growth strategy that the city was implementing, and the school boards are currently updating their capital plans based on that. But it's very challenging if you don't know if an expansion will ultimately get approved, to sort of make sure that you're planning the right amount of schools. But maybe the school boards are definitely going to be looking at these applications, and they've provided us guidance on what applicants need to give them, so they can tell their boards and tell council what impacts these applications would have on schools.
Great, thanks, Charlie. A couple of questions around environmental impact studies, and looking for assurances, for example, that new developments won't cause more flooding in the lower city or any other parts of the city.
Yes. So that would be the focus of the phase 1 sub watersheds study, which looks at existing drainage patterns, water courses within whichever proposed expansion area the application is for, and does the work to understand what the implications would be. And with that, I should say that if urban boundary expansion is ultimately approved, any expansion area would then be subject to secondary plan approval, which would be a lot more detailed land use plan. And through the secondary plan, there would have to be a phase 2 and I believe phase 3 sub watershed study that would then get into like the specific infrastructure that would have to be put in place to prevent a flooding of urban development on those lands.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Let's do two more here. We've got lots of great questions and we're going to try to get to all of them, but a couple more that are related to this segment. And this one maybe sets up the next segment as well, Charlie. Can we ensure all potential climate impacts on and by these new boundary expansions are paid for?
So by paid for, the environment and climate change assessment is required. It requires the applicant to show what how they would sort of mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and other sort of impacts to climate and the environment. I'm not sure, maybe Morgan, if there can be a clarification on what pay for means, but ultimately the applicants, and if an urban boundary expansion is approved, the developers of those lands would have to develop those lands in accordance with provincial regulations and policies, and any sort of environmental requirements sort of put upon them by the city. And the city has recently approved green development standards, which would obviously then apply should any of these expansion areas be approved. But yeah, maybe I can provide additional information if there's clarity on that.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, and please feel free for folks that can enter any additional context or a new question. Let's do one more, Charlie. We've got a lot of upvotes on a couple of questions here before we move on to the next part of the framework. How about this one? Can Hamilton say that we're just too busy doing intensification within our already firm urban boundaries to even consider something outside because we're already meeting provincial targets?
Yes, great question. No, we cannot. Any expansion application would be made under the Planning Act, and the Planning Act. I'll get this into my later slides, but the Planning Act says once an applicant gives a city an official plan amendment application, whether it's to expand an urban boundary or just to redesignate a property to allow a different type of use. The city only has 120 days to make a decision on that application prior to the applicant having the rights to appeal council's refusal or non-decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So if the city simply did not process the application, that clock would eventually run out, and then they could appeal it, and then the Ontario Land Tribunal would make a final ruling on whether that expansion is approved. And that's why the city has identified the need for a dedicated team just to be ready to process these applications. So other departments within the whole city, including planning, can continue our work to approve policies and zoning regulations that foster residential intensification.
That's great. Thanks, Charlie. Okay, well, we've got almost 30 open questions here, but we will move on to the next parts of the framework. And as I said, we'll try to get to as many as we can. So Charlie, I'll let you move on to part B of the draft framework.
Okay, great. So part B of the framework establishes thematic considerations that the city would use to assess urban boundary expansion applications. These considerations build upon the work that the city had completed through the most recent growth-related integrated development strategy, known as GRIDS 2, but they've also been refined by input from city departments as well as new policies in the provincial planning statement. And with these considerations, if you read through the draft framework, they aren't phrased as, minimum. These aren't minimum requirements where if the applicant feels they check all the boxes, then it's like an automatic, staff approval or anything like that. What they are is they're all phrased as questions. So applicants have to tell us, like, how does an urban boundary expansion impact the city's ability to achieve a net zero by 2050? How does it achieve the city's policies of achieving, other land use planning objectives related to housing, protection of natural heritage resources, multimodal transportation systems, things of those nature. So you can move on to the next slide. Okay.
Okay, so we wanted to pause here again. So Charlie just briefly outlined those sort of key considerations. Feel free to put into the comments into the chat if you have other considerations you think the city should include in this evaluation framework. And then we're also opening up if you have questions about these key considerations. So Charlie, I'm just turning to the Q&A and I'm trying to scan through for some questions related to the considerations. So one question that we have is, what feedback or input do home or property owners have in all of this? As this could drastically impact their homes, their families, their lives, and their investments.
Yeah. So when we get to part C, which speaks to the process, one thing that we really want to hear through this engagement is how and when, and trying to think of any others. The public want to be notified and provide their input on urban boundary expansion applications when they are received, so that when that application is received, those residents have a chance to fully assess and re review the applications for themselves, ask questions of staff about the application, but also, make their comments known to it would be planning committee and the city council of how you feel council should make a decision on these applications. So there might be more questions related to notification on the next few slides, but that is exactly sort of why one of the main objectives for our consultation on this is making sure that we are reaching people in ways that they can and want to be reached to learn about urban boundary expansion applications.
Thanks, Charlie. So a great suggestion in the chat here. Maybe Laura, if we could just back up to that last slide, the key considerations. So just while we're chatting about this, we can have it up there, what those key considerations.
There's a lot there, so yeah.
There's a lot, yeah. So you can just take a moment to absorb those. One related question, Charlie, that's come in is, what about healthcare? So, having, might there be a need to put a family healthcare unit if none in that area exists? And how do we service these sort of new populations?
Yeah, great question. So some of the considerations we're looking at is whether the expansion area would be and form part of a larger complete community, so that if the expansion area is approved, and let's assume it's residential, do people have all the services that they need within that area, so they don't have to, travel halfway across Hamilton to get the sort of get those services that they need, including healthcare. So, screen just went black. So that is one thing that we are looking at is and asking the applicants to give us is, what is your concept for this? What types of uses would you have within these urban expansion areas, so we can assess, whether there's an appropriate mix and whether, this area could function on its own and integrate well with the surrounding area, or what we want to avoid is a little pocket of like an island where people have to travel outside of it to get the services that they need by automobile.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Just there's a lot of information in these slides, and so just wanted to reassure you that we will be making these available. And again, all of this information is available on the Engage page, but this slide deck specifically it will be up, should be by early next week. But there's also some helpful infographics and lots of information on the Engage page, so you can kind of better absorb all this, and there'll still be a bit of time to submit some questions and comments. Charlie, maybe we'll just do a couple quick more questions around the sort of key considerations or the studies and that sort of thing. One question here was, will we be considering the urban boundary expansion's contribution to more affordable housing, or is it, simply taking up valuable green space with dwellings with a much higher single environmental footprint? So how are we considering it potential expansion contribution to affordable housing versus, taking the environmental footprint of that expansion?
Yeah, one of the new submission requirements that we would be asking for is we're calling it a housing assessment, where we're asking the applicant to tell us a few things. But one is, whether this expansion area will take away from the intensification that we're already planning for, and if so, how much of that growth will be sort of redirected away from the existing built-up area to the new expansion area. But we're also asking them for detailed information on the types of land uses, and sort of asking them to make their own, give them a chance, like if they feel that, or if they're proposing to include, certain types of housing within that expansion area, they can set that out in their housing assessment to to kind of show why they think that this expansion will have a positive impact overall on maybe the type or price of housing within the city. I should note that that there's nothing in the Planning Act that or in the provincial planning statement that allows municipalities saying to say we will only give you or we will only support an expansion area if you give us, X number of affordable housing units or anything of that nature. We can applicants can certainly say that they're going to do it, and per proposed policies in their official plan amendment that kind of sets out those objectives. But there's no way for the city to kind of say we would only support this if you give us X, Y, or Z in every turn.
Okay. Thanks, Charlie. I'm going to suggest that we keep going here into the last part of the draft framework. I've got recognition that there's 40 open questions. And so thanks a lot for your participation. And I'm going to especially get to those upvoted ones, but I'd like to give Charlie an opportunity to walk us through the last part of the framework.
Great. So Part C of the draft framework sets out the process in which any urban boundary expansion application would be received, processed, considered, and decided. And this is for the benefit of both applicants as well as the public. As I mentioned earlier, under the Planning Act, an official plan amendment to expand the urban boundary is treated the same as any other official plan amendment application, even though the implications are much larger. So what we've done in the draft framework is identify enhanced or additional consultation and notification steps for both the city and the applicant to make sure that while we only have 120 days from when the application is deemed complete to when we make a decision, that we really make sure that everyone who wants to be informed of that application is informed of it, and there's multiple opportunities for the public to provide comments. So a few of the things that are in the draft framework now and that we're asking for feedback on, because it's not too late for us to make changes before we finalize it, are things like calling on the applicants to undertake pre-application engagement with the First Nations and Indigenous communities, as well as the public, in the general. Requiring additional public notice signs surrounding the expansion area, so they can't just put up one sign for a 500 hectare area. They would have to. The draft framework says there would have to be a sign every 500 meters, both around and through the proposed expansion area, as well as making sure that the letters notifying people that an application has been received goes out to a much larger area. And I think the number in the draft framework now is 400 meters. That the city will hold one open house, at least one open house to receive input on the application. And this is in addition to the public meeting that would be held at Planning Committee. And then finally, making all of the application materials publicly accessible on the city's website. So anyone who wants to learn about the application can easily access all of the information that was given with the application, be kept up to date on what the application status is, and know who to contact if they have questions. And that site, as I mentioned, just went up live today. So maybe next slide.
Okay, I'll hop on here. I'm going to be putting a poll on, and we're going to be asking how you'd like to be notified when an application for an urban boundary expansion is made. So if you give me one moment, I'm going to put the poll up. Make sure I got the right one. Okay, so it should have popped on your screen now. Feel free to answer. And if there are any other options that you'd prefer, please put that in the chat. Okay, so we're seeing a lot for email right now, as well as the City of Hamilton main website and the Engage Hamilton website. We have a few, probably equally for mail and text message as well. It looks like almost, oh, I'll still wait a few minutes. There's some coming in as well. Looks like it's slowed down. So I'll just end it and share what I've seen so far. Here we go. So again, looks like email is the most preferred choice with the City of Hamilton main website and following with the City of Hamilton Engage website.
And maybe, Charlie, you can just mention there the email list that you have. Maybe just tell folks about that and how they can sign up.
Yes, if you want to be notified both of the, sort of the next steps with the work on the draft framework, as well as notified if any urban boundary application is made or when meetings are related to urban boundary expansion applications, you can email urbanboundary@hamilton.ca and just ask to join that list. We are starting a new list that is different than the a few years ago, the city started a called a Grids 2 list related to the last update to the official plan. Because of privacy requirements, we wish we could just continue to use that list because it's got a lot of people on, but we do have to create a new list for urban boundary expansion. So just make sure that you just send an email and I'll confirm every few days or so, just to confirm that you are on that list, and then you will start to receive notices through that. And I also put a link in the chat of the City of Hamilton webpage where we're posting information on urban boundary expansion applications, as well as applications related to urban boundaries, where those are now saved. So.
Great, thanks, Charlie. So we just got a couple more poll questions that we'll take you through for around the notification and participation in this process.
Okay, and thank you again for everybody who's participating in this as well. So our next question is when you would like to be notified of a new urban boundary expansion proposal. Okay, so that should be launched now. Okay, great. We're seeing a lot come in right now. We have the most at the moment is on receipt of the application. So as soon as a new urban boundary expansion proposal is submitted, we have some for when an application status changes. And maybe Charlie, you can expand on what that means as well.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, what that could mean is if we receive an application and the city deems the application incomplete, you would get notice that the city deemed the application incomplete. If the applicant then comes back to the city and gives us the information that we've identified as being required to process the application and the status changes from incomplete to complete, you would be notified of that, as well as if at any time the applicant submits an appeal related to the application.
Great, thank you for clarifying. Looks like it has trickled down now, so I'm going to end the poll and share the results for everyone to see. Again, we have most people indicating that they want to be notified upon the receipt of application. When the application status changes, just like Charlie explained, prior to a council meeting and then after the council meeting. Great. Okay. And the last one, I believe, we have how would you like to provide feedback on a new urban boundary expansion proposal? let me launch that. Thank you again for everybody who's participating. It's great to see so many people engaging right now. Okay, right now we have majority is through email. We have a few that prefer the City of Hamilton main website and Engage website as well. Oh dear. Yeah, it's still trickling in. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now and share. So like I reiterated, not has much changed since I spoke last, but we have email, first of all, then the City of Hamilton Engage website, pretty much tied with the City of Hamilton main website, then a few prefer mail, and then lastly, text message. Okay, I'll hand it back to Charlie.
Okay, great. So drilling into notification a bit more, and it's probably a good thing we don't have a poll on if people like our current sign, but our public notice sign. But one thing that the city can control with planning applications is the design of public notice signs, and the planning division is underway in sort of updating all of our signs to give the public a bit clearer picture of what is being proposed, not just for urban boundary expansion applications, but for any development application. But just sort of as a separate, question to put out there for comment is there any specific information that you would want to see on a public notice sign to let you know that an urban boundary expansion application has been received for a piece of property? And on the slide, it sort of highlights the information that's sort of on the signs now, and some of that, the kind of smaller print, we have to put on because it's a requirement under the Planning Act, but we do have some flexibility as well. So I'm not sure if I can't recall if there's a poll question on that, or if that's something that people can. There's okay.
So let me get that launched. Okay. And while I have this launched, I'm going to go back. Oops, excuse me. I'm going to go back to the notice so people can view it at the same time. So right now it's exactly 50-50. Oh, it's changed a little bit now, but I'll just leave this up for about 30 more seconds just to allow everyone to get an opinion. And like Charlie said, if there are any other specific things that you think could be on the notice, you can put that in the chat, or you can, oh, thank you, Morgan. Morgan's just put in the chat that you can email urbanboundary@hamilton.ca if there are any other things that you'd like to have on this notice. Okay, looks like it's trickled down a little bit, so I'm going to end and share. Looks like most have said yes, and it's pretty close to 50-50, but the majority have said yes, and 47% have said no.
That's really helpful, and we've got some comments coming into the chat function just for some additional information that would be helpful. So thank you all for that. I just want to acknowledge a couple of helpful comments here too. We were talking about this email list, and why can't we just use that great big grids to email list, Charlie? But I believe that has something to do around like privacy and consent to send emails, right?
Yeah, I should mention too on that. One thing that we will be doing shortly is sending an email out to the grids too, asking people if they want to opt in to the new urban boundary email list that they can do so. So currently people can opt out of that list, but under the privacy rules, we have to have people actively opt in to the new list. So we do expect through that email we will get a number of people saying yes they do want to learn more about this, and the email that we'll send out sort of will say what you're signing up for by opting in.
Yeah. And I also want to acknowledge a really important comment from Mary in the chat here. We had that poll on how you would like to participate and provide your feedback, and there was not an option for in person. So well noted there that, and I think that's, part of the process that Charlie laid out is some open house opportunities. But thanks for that comment that, of course, folks may also want to be able to provide feedback in person. And so, Charlie, maybe could you just reiterate what the potential opportunities might be for any kind of in-person feedback on an expansion application?
Okay, I think there would be ideally three, but at least two. So the first is the draft framework does ask the applicants to hold their own neighborhood community meeting prior to even making their application, just to give residents a sort of a heads up what is coming for allow the applicant to explain what they're planning on doing, and to answer questions and to get feedback before they actually make the application. The second is if an application is received and deemed complete, the city would hold at least one open house, and that would be in person. And there is the possibility that we would hold a, in person and virtual open house, maybe something similar to what we're having now. But the city itself would hold at least one in-person open house for people to provide their comments in the person. And then finally, the city will be holding a statutory public meeting at planning committee. So that's when you would register as a delegate, and you would have a time, and you could come and speak directly to planning committee and share your thoughts. And the members of council on planning committee can ask questions of you as they like. So it would be at least two, ideally three, once we continue working through the draft framework.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. So, folks, we have about 15 minutes left in our time. So, just a few more slides where we're going to just talk a little bit more about how you can continue to participate in this process to finalize the draft framework. And then we'll try to get to a few more questions before we have to wrap up at 8:30. So, we'll hand it back to Charlie.
Great. So yeah, I know there's a lot of questions, so I won't take time. But as Morgan mentioned, we have had just under 200 people show up to the open houses, and I won't get into the sort of the buckets of different types of comments that we've been getting, but I can say that we've had a diverse group of people coming out to these meetings. There's interested residents from throughout the city showing up, as well as residents who live sort of within or directly adjacent to these potential areas where we may receive applications. And just one more thing, that on the Engage page, we have a copy of the draft framework where people can insert comments directly into it. And I just checked that before the meeting, and there's been a wide range of sort of very detailed comments on the draft framework, which we'll be taking back as well. So yeah, we appreciate all the feedback, and so far it's ranged to like broad, almost philosophical questions to very detailed questions about some of the submission requirements that we've identified. Next slide.
Okay, so we'll just kind of come towards the end here for how you can continue to participate in the finalization of the draft framework. So the QR code there will take you to the Engage Hamilton webpage associated with this undertaking. So that's engage.hamilton.ca/UBE application framework. And as we've said numerous times, there's lots more information there and opportunities to participate and to read the draft framework itself in its entirety and put comments straight into it. As Laura mentioned, there's going to be a survey once we close this webinar. So please answer that. And then, of course, we're always inviting questions online at the Engage page, or you can contact Charlie directly. You've met him now, so you can give him a call at that number or email him. That goes directly to him. And maybe Laura, you can just put those in the chat too if people want to sort of copy those out. I guess maybe we'll go to the next slide as well, because there's sort of our most upvoted question right now is not a question per se, but a statement about sort of the provincial role in all of this and the position it kind of puts the city in. So maybe this next slide will be our way to kind of answer that sort of most upvoted comment that we have in the Q&A.
Yeah, so a comment that we've received a lot is, we like from people who just oppose that these changes have been made that allow these applications to be processed. So for those types of comments, because the province isn't actively engaging on those changes, they've already been made. We're telling presidents, if you have questions or concerns about those changes, to contact the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing directly, but there's also local MPPs who are in the government, and we shared the link on the website, and they're shared here. So part of this process on the draft framework, we're not going to be sending a report to the province saying, this is what our draft framework is. The focus of our engagement has been to get input on the things that we can control. So, yeah, maybe I'll just leave it at that then.
Okay. So where are we at here? What happens next, Charlie? Maybe just take us through quickly the next steps, and then we'll try to get to a couple more questions before we got to close out.
Okay, great. So what happens next? Next slide. The next slide happens next. So staff, we're just wrapping up our engagement on the draft framework now. So we'll be collecting all of the feedback received for the various ways that we've been going out and getting input and giving it to a Dylan who have the job of summarizing all of the feedback and giving us a report of what we've heard. So, and that report will be made public on the city's webpage, and it would also be included and responded to. And the next step for city staff, which would be taking a report to Planning Committee and Council, which would include amendments to our urban and rural Hamilton official plan to enshrine the requirements of the draft framework into official plan policy. And what that does is it essentially gives those policies more teeth as they are approved official plan policies rather than a draft document that a council has approved. So staff are targeting taking that report early in 2025. We don't have a planning committee date yet, but on that urban boundary email list, one of the things that you would be notified of is when that planning committee meeting has been set and where you can get a copy of the, I'll call it the final version of the framework and the official plan amendment and staff's report. And with any official plan amendment, we will also be having a a public meeting at planning committee where anyone who has comments on what's in the final framework and the official plan policy changes can come and speak directly to planning committee before they make a recommendation to council, and then council hopefully will support the changes to the official plan amendment. I should note though that because this official plan amendment would apply essentially citywide, it is also subject to appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So if there are appeals to the official plan amendment to enshrine the framework into policy, that could potentially slow down from when those policies come into effect. And I think that's it.
Okay, so yeah, we're just going to pause here. We're approaching the end of our time, but we did want to give just a little bit more space for some questions. For those of you looking for it, this again is the contact information for Charlie, and the project webpage, and that QR code will take you there. And this is how you can get in touch with Charlie and participate more and learn more about all of this. So Charlie, I'm going to go just, well, we've got the time, to our most upvoted question. An interesting one about how do the strong mayor powers relate to these policy orders and the capacity of the mayor to represent the city and councillors. Any thoughts or comment on how that might relate here?
Good question. So yeah, there are strong mayor powers, but maybe we can sort of respond back in sort of the after Q&A on this, but the strong mayor's powers don't allow the mayor to overturn an Ontario Land Tribunal decision. So it could impact what the final staff or what the final council decision is on an urban boundary expansion application. But if an application is appealed, the mayor does not have a power to change that decision or stop a urban boundary expansion application from being appealed.
Thanks,
That's
Charlie.
a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
I want to try to summarize a few of these questions that we're seeing as we come to the end. There are a number of questions around the OLT, the Ontario Land Tribunal, and questions like, can a developer just go to the OLT if they submit an incomplete application, or a number of questions to the effect of, what's the point of all of this if it just gets appealed to the OLT? So maybe as we come to the end here, you can talk a little bit more about how the OLT factors in, and just a quick, what the heck is the OLT, and just give us a little quick primer on that and how that factors in.
Okay. So the Ontario Land Tribunal is a quasi-judicial review board that has the authority to make decisions on local planning matters. And within the Planning Act, there's numerous opportunities where someone submits a planning application, where if an application is not made within a certain time period, or if the applicant does not agree with the decision made by the municipality, they can appeal that to the Ontario Land Tribunal, which, for lack of a better term, almost functions like a little planning court, where both the city and the applicant would provide evidence before the Ontario Land Tribunal member and call witnesses to provide evidence, and that evidence can be cross-examined by the other lawyers to sort of go through the two opposing positions on whether or not something, a specific development application, it conforms and is consistent with those provincial policies that I talked about, or the official plan, or whichever policies are in place to sort of govern how those applications are to be handled. And the Ontario Land Tribunal makes a ruling. So it's made up of individual members, and that member would then make a ruling, which would sort of be the final decision on that official plan amendment application. Morgan, you mentioned a comment about appealing an incomplete application. So that is sometimes something that I should certainly know is under the Planning Act. Let's say the city receives an urban boundary expansion application. We look at it against the policies and framework that we have in place, and we say, no, we don't accept this application that's missing X, Y, and Z things. We send that back to the applicant. The applicant then has two things that they can do. Ideally, they would go back and say, okay, we will work and we will give you those additional items that you have asked for. And then once we give you those things, we do expect you will deem the application come complete and begin to process it. Or they can submit an appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal saying that the submission requirements that the city identified, they don't think they're necessary for deeming the application come complete. And then the Ontario Land Tribunal would hold that sort of planning court process, and they would make a ruling not on the merits of the application itself, just on whether the application is deemed come complete or not. So if the Ontario Land Tribunal agrees with the applicant that what they gave the city was enough to deem the application come complete, when the Ontario Land Tribunal makes that ruling, that's when the 120 days would start, I believe, or close to it. Like that is essentially when the ball is in the city's court, and the city will begin that quick review process and hold those public meetings, and then prepare a recommendation to council. It's pretty complex. Ontario is unique in sort of its planning processes. So happy also if anyone has more detailed questions or was completely confused by what I just said. My number's up there. Give me a call and maybe I can make more sense out of it. But
yeah, I think that's an important message here. We recognize this is a lot to go through. And if you're not living and breathing this policy, it's a lot to catch up on. So Charlie is available. We're all available to answer questions after this. There's two quick ones, Charlie, I want to end on as we come to the end of our time here. Just a quick clarification on that Grids2 email list. There was somebody that was asking like, well, this is a shame you're going to lose all those contacts. Is it possible, Charlie, that you can email all of those people and say, if you want to sign up for the urban boundary expansion, let me know? Like so we'll reach out to everybody on there, right?
Yes, yeah, we will reach out and say if you want to opt in to this new urban boundary list, then email this urban boundary at hamilton.ca email address and just say I want to opt in, and then you will be on that new list.
Yeah.
So
hopefully, we're not losing all those contacts. But thank you for that question. And maybe Charlie, just to end off here, and I think this question kind of goes to the heart of all of this. Can you just tell us one more time, why is it that we're where we're at, and why is it that the province is able to make these changes that impact the city, and when the city's already decided on a firm urban boundary, or they may reject applications for urban boundary expansion? Just one more time, why are we in this position?
Yeah, so the province really is responsible or has the authority to set all of the sort of province-wide rules for how the city plans its community. So through I think the generalized like a combination of the Planning Act, which sets out how applications are to be processed, and the provincial planning statement, and the other provincial plans like the Greenbelt plan sort of set out to individual municipalities that any decision that the city makes has to be in line with these rules. So it's almost set up to be a process that if the city decides to sort of not process specific application because the city has recently adopted a different direction with the Bill 185 changes, it sort of it creates processes where the province enables the Ontario Land Tribunal to potentially, it's not an automatic, but potentially uh, reverse or make decisions that impact city like Hamilton or any other city in Ontario.
Okay, thanks, Charlie, just for that reiteration of the context here. Laura, maybe we can just pop down to the last slide. I think it's got the same information that this one does, but yeah, just go to the very last one so people have the info there for how to continue to stay involved in this process. Just from my perspective, I just want to thank everybody for participating. We have a ton of questions. As you can see, there are 68 open questions and comments still. I apologize we weren't able to get to all of them, but hopefully we cleared up a few things. We will be answering these questions or kind of combining and answering them on that Engage page. But thank you everyone for your participation. And Charlie, we'll just leave the last word to you.
Oh, yeah. Just to echo Morgan, thank you for everyone for taking time out of their evening to attend this. And yeah, I can just say it's like through this process, but as well as the open houses and like the calls I've been getting, it's really great to see Hamilton residents so interested in as a land use planner and sort of how Hamilton grows and sort of just the wanting to be involved in the process because the process improves the more people who are, or like the outcomes improve the more people who are involved. So yeah, just thank you for attending and yeah, feel free to reach out to me at any time. That's my direct extension there too. So so you aren't going to go to like a bot or anything like that.
That's great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.